This episode is brought to you by my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group Program. If you're listening in real time, registration for my January 2018 groups is now open. To reserve your spot today, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 169. Welcome to the 169th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Today, I have another installment of my Fertility Awareness Reality Series for you. I'm really excited to share today's interview with Sarah. So Sarah is a member of my Fertility Awareness Mastery 10-week group program, and she's part of our conception group. And so this time around, it has just been so... I always say this, but I really do attract the sweetest, nicest women to me. And so this time around has been no different. And it's been just so nice to see the connections that have been forming in the group and the support that women are gaining from each other within the group. We've really created a safe space where, you can share what's happening with you. And so a lot of women in the group have shared different things that are happening in their lives. And the group has just been a really great place to hold that space for those conversations. And so I'm really happy to be a part of that and to be facilitating that and to have Sarah on the show today. So as you know, for those of you who've listened to the podcast before, or even if you're a new listener, the information that we're going to be presenting here today, it's not intended to be medical advice. All of my clients have multiple practitioners and health professionals that they work with. So all of my clients have medical doctors. Most of my clients, or many of my clients, also work with functional medicine practitioners. And so, all of the information that we're talking about today is for informational purposes only. And all of my clients, like I said, have a team of professionals that are supporting them to really optimize their fertility. And so I am just one of the members of their team. So I have opened registration for my January edition of my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group Program. And so this group program is an amazing opportunity to connect with women who are in a similar stage as you. So I divide the groups into two. I have one group that's focused on women who are actively avoiding pregnancy and wanting to use this method as a birth control method. Some of the women in the group do have plans to have children at some point, but their time horizon is a bit further away. And so they want to make sure that they're really confident using this method for birth control to avoid pregnancy until they're ready to start trying to conceive, maybe 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever the case is for them. And then I have a separate group of women who are either actively trying to conceive or in the preconception phase, where they're really, planning to start trying to conceive shortly in the future. And so this group is more geared towards, pregnancy and actively trying. What's interesting is that in both groups, we cover essentially the same information, except that because we're coming at it from different perspectives, we kind of highlight and focus on different parts of the same information. So in each group setting, whether you're in the pregnancy preparation group or the birth control group, we do cover the same information. And often in the birth control group, we do end up talking about preconception planning at some point, even if it's super long in the future, because it comes up so often as someone who's in both groups. So, although the primary focus of both groups is different, essentially we cover very much the same information. In some cases, we just cover it in different ways. For more information about the group program, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. So that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. And without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. And today I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Sarah, to the show. Sarah is one of the members of my current group program, my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery, and she's in the conception program. So at the time of this recording, Sarah and I have had about 7 or 8 group sessions together. So we're well into our program. So we've been together for a little over 2 months. We've had lots of hot seats. We've had our one-on-ones. So we're very well acquainted, Sarah and I. And so I just want to welcome you to the show, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I cannot believe that I'm actually going to be on your podcast after being such a huge fan for so long. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. And so we were talking a little bit in the pre-chat just about, what we would be covering in today's episode, but I would love for us to just start by giving the listeners a little bit of background. So maybe we could just start with, when did you get your first period? I love how this is like the first question, as if it's like in a normal situation, this would feel a little bit awkward. Like, so when was your first period? But just to get a sense of where we're at in terms of your cycle. So when your first period started, if you have a history of hormonal birth control use, and kind of what brought us to where we are now.
Sure. And just as a side note, I feel like I'm so much more comfortable talking about all this now. So I didn't even think of that as a weird question. I was like, oh, of course we're going to talk about that. Sounds good.
Awesome.
So I first got my period when I was 12. And then I started going on hormonal birth control when I was 19. And then I would say when I was younger, before birth control, my periods were very heavy. And I definitely remember having like really bad cramps. And then when I went on birth control, I would be on a certain birth control, and then I would start to have irregular cycles. And for me, what that meant was I would have periods like every 2 weeks. And so when that happened, I would go see my doctor, and they were like, oh, no problem. They would say, like, your hormones are off. We'll just put you on a different birth control, and that will solve that. And so that happened quite a few times. I would say every year or so. And then I was on birth control for over 10 years before my husband and I started trying to conceive.
Okay. And so at the time of the recording, it's 2017. So we're in like October 2017. So when did you go off of the birth control, the hormonal birth control?
So a little over 3.5 years ago.
Okay. So that was like, my math in my head isn't always the greatest. So it's like 2014-ish, something like that.
Yeah, I think January. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I know my math.
It's the afternoon. I was using my brain this morning. About 3.5 years ago, then you came off hormonal birth control.
Yeah, correct. And I will never go on it again.
Well, and so, you've been on a journey for quite some time. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about what happened since then. So what happened when you first came off of birth control, and how did that all kind of play out?
Sure. Yes. So we tried naturally for the first year, and we really, just from listening to your podcast now, we were trying, but we were definitely not like totally counting days. We would like look at stuff online where it's just like, every other day or every, 3 days. We're like, okay, but now I know that, there was like a good chunk of time, like, 2 weeks post ovulation, like that was pointless, but you know what I mean? We wasn't really trying. So then after a year, I went to my just gynecologist, and she put me on Clomid, and we tried just a few cycles with just Clomid. And during that time, she had me come in on day 21 to check my progesterone. But again, this has come up in our work together. It's funny now because since I wasn't really tracking my cycle, like I don't know if, day 21 would have been 7 days post ovulation for me. So, at that time, they did not think I had ovulated. And so then we started again with just my regular gynecologist doing an Ovidrel shot, which kind of forces ovulation. And then also we started doing IUIs with her. And then we were able to do 2. And then on the third one, she didn't have the insemination go forward because my eggs were just not big enough. They weren't responding to the Clomid. And so then that's when we got referred to a fertility specialist. And then one thing I did forget to say too was also before we had started doing the IUIs, we had gotten my husband's sperm tested, and he had 97% abnormal morphology. So then we went to a fertility specialist, and we started this time on Femera instead of the Clomid. And we started a series of IUIs. And I will say with my fertility specialist, I was going in a lot more for the ultrasound so they could check the progress of the egg and then change medication as needed. When those three didn't work, my husband and I decided that we wanted to go start IVF. It took us a couple cycles to even start that, just because, so that's when I started doing injectables as well. So injectable hormones like Gonal F and Medipure. And again, also, I forgot to mention this, when I also went to my fertility specialist, they tested my AMH, and I have a low number, which means that I have a low egg reserve for my age. That can be harder to get pregnant. It means you have fewer eggs left in your body. Also, with that, we found out that I was a poor responder to those injectables that I was taking. So there were a couple cycles where we didn't go forward with IVF just because, we didn't maybe had, 3 eggs. When we were able to do our first one, we had 4 eggs pre-retrieval. They were able to get 3, and 2 looked really good, and they were able to implant those. But unfortunately, it was not successful. And then that 3rd egg didn't end up, we weren't able to freeze it. It didn't make it to that point. And then at that point, I'm a teacher. And during that time, we just decided that we should maybe wait till the summer. We had also decided that after that, I finished that school year, I would not go back to teach just because we wanted to focus, 100% on fertility. And we felt like, I just, as a teacher, and I'm sure many teachers or anyone else there with a stressful job can relate, I just felt like that was really my stress level getting in the way of fertility as well. And then we had so many doctor's appointments. I was just so worried about like finding coverage for my classroom and feeling of anxiety around that. So we decided that was be the best next step for now for us. And so then that summer, we were again going to do an IVF cycle, but we kind of had a weird cycle where early on in the cycle, I had an egg that was just like larger. And what they do sometimes in those cases is they'll aspirate it. So they'll kind of remove it. And so they did that. And then I was able to then again kind of continue. I think they even gave me some birth control at that point to take for a couple days. And then to start back up on the injectables. And we had 3 eggs, but then when they went for retrieval, none of them were viable. So then my doctor decided that, maybe I needed to have a laparoscopy and hysteroscopy. And so that's just kind of a minor surgery, but they go in and they kind of look to see what's going on and just make sure like nothing's wrong with the anatomy. And he also was like, due to your age, it's because I think I was 35 at that time. It's most likely that I'd have some endometriosis in there. So they kind of wanted to check for that too. So we did that surgery, and I did have just stage 1 endometriosis, but everything else looked pretty good. They did kind of pop open one of my tubes that had closed a little bit. And Lisa, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that also when I was still seeing my gynecologist, I had an HSG done, and it had come back clear. I always forget about that. Like the dye had gone through. So after I healed from the laparoscopy, and it did take a while for my period to come back. I want to say it was maybe 6 or 7 weeks after the surgery. He wanted to do a series of IUIs and have me on kind of a lowered dose of the same hormones I was taking, but a lower dose, and see if that would help. And, we did do that series of 3. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. And then at that point, that kind of brings us to January of this past year. And we had decided to kind of take a little break before going back in again. And it was during that time I started doing a lot of different readings. And I started making a lot of changes with my nutrition. And I also started a fertility yoga workshop that was half support group. Each week we'd learn, something new about wellness practices or nutrition. And then, so I started that, and I just started seeing like, wow, there's a lot of ways I can improve my body. Because before I just had this like mentality that everything was out of my control and there was nothing I could do to improve my egg quality. There was, it was just, I had to kind of leave it up to the doctors. And the more reading I did, I just realized like, I need to learn more about this. I need to be a little more in control and, be a little more proactive about, what I can do. Around that time, I also started listening to your podcast. I hired a fertility coach who I worked with, and we really focused more on the wellness piece, just because I was feeling like lots of anxiety at that point. And we kind of, focused on different practices like journaling, meditation, just ways for me to kind of de-stress and not hold everything in. I did go back in July of this past year just to have kind of, just a meeting with my doctor. But at this point, I just like did not want to go back on any of those hormones and move forward with any procedures just because they were really hard on my body when I was taking them. Like I had gained like 20 pounds because I had been on, that medication for such a long time. And it just, I had really bad headaches. I just felt miserable. So I just felt like I didn't feel like that was the right thing for me to do. So instead, I signed up for your fertility awareness class. And I've just continued to learn more about my cycle. And we've also found, it's been really interesting, the things that we've learned from my cycle since I switched to the Justice method.
Well, Sarah, thank you for taking us through that. I mean, first and foremost, of course, this isn't the first time I'm hearing about your journey, but this is the first time that the listeners are hearing about your journey. And you've really been through the ringer. The number of procedures that you've been through, the number of IUIs, I think is it 9? Something like that? 9 IUIs and then IVF as well. And of course, like my little commentary, I should probably keep that to myself. But, I recently did an episode about IUI. And so I find it to just be a little bit hard to hear how many times that they put you through that, because in one of the studies that I was referencing in that podcast, it showed that if you look at the graph, the more times you have it, it doesn't increase the chances. So it's like after the first 3 or 4 attempts, the actual chance of you getting pregnant, it doesn't like increase. It's kind of like there's like a place where once you've done so many, the line kind of like tapers off. And so the chances of it working, say on the 10th try, it's not higher. So I hear that and I just feel frustrated. I'm sure some of the listeners are in a similar perspective. Some women just don't respond as well to those drugs as they are not without consequence and they're not without effect on your body. So it makes you wonder, well, at what point do we stop harming the body and try to heal the body? Anyways, so I just wanted to say that. But maybe, okay, so you talked about basically up until this point. So we have a sense of kind of everything that has led us here and then some of what we've gleaned from your chart. So maybe you could share, I guess, what has been, I don't know if the most surprising, but what has stood out to you the most that we've kind of gleaned from your charts and your cycles since we've started working together in the group?
I would say the biggest thing was, I think it was during my first hot seat. So we were in a group session and you were looking over my chart and you were looking at my temperatures and you had said, I'm really noticing that your temperatures are low. And I was like, well, what do you think that might be? And you had mentioned, it could be a thyroid issue. And I remember I was like, wait, what? Because back in January, when I had been doing a lot of research, I had also been concerned about my thyroid. And so I had gone to my general practitioner doctor and asked, have my thyroid done. And he had actually just done, I did not have a full panel done. I didn't know at that time, that's what I should have asked for. But he had done my TSH and I actually think I have it right here. It was 3.76. And then also in July, I had gone, when I had met with my fertility doctor, again, they had done my TSH. I don't have that number right in front of me, but it was, 4 something. And I remember I shared that with you and you were like, oh, that's too high. And it was so interesting because they had said, that's both of them had communicated to me that was normal. And then you had said to me, actually, you really want it at 1 or 2. And so I was just like, I felt like I was like, I knew there was something with my thyroid. You know what I mean? And I was just like, everyone's like, no, it's normal. You're fine. It's normal. And then you were like, no, this is not normal. So it was just like, it was a good feeling. And I think, obviously like that would have been nice to like have known back in March when I got it tested, but I just feel like so fortunate that you were able to like point that out to me now. And obviously there's also other indications in my chart that it could be my thyroid just because I have a short luteal phase, which can mean something's going on with progesterone. So it was just, it's not like a great feeling to like hear something's wrong, but it's like so good to hear like, okay, here's what the chart's showing me, like, and now I can take steps to fix it.
Yeah, I feel, yeah. So it's interesting because from my perspective, like I see the charts first. And so it's kind of like the chart comes first and then the testing comes second. But the chart can give us insight into what types of things we should be asking for. And then we're able to kind of corroborate what's happening. And to kind of, for anyone who maybe hasn't listened to a lot of the thyroid podcast episodes, so I've had a number of episodes in particular about thyroid health, but basically, when you go to your, regular medical doctor and you get a TSH test done or you get any type of thyroid testing done. So, of course, if you get the piece of paper, you'll see a lab range. And so typically from my understanding and from what I've seen on the lab ranges, is that for a TSH test, they'll have a lab range of like 0.5 to 4.5 or something like that around there. And so anything that falls within that range, typically the doctors are saying it's normal. Often fertility specialists will not. So fertility specialists will know that even a suboptimal thyroid within the range is a potential issue for fertility. But often you're, it's just if it's in the range, then it's fine. Whereas if you were to go to a functional practitioner, they would look at that and say, okay, well, if it's over 2, then we need to actually investigate more. So I'm happy that we were able to pick up on that. It's different when you're looking at the chart. So in my seat, from where I sit, a thyroid issue is obvious on a chart. When that's my primary tool, so that's why it's easier for me. So I guess to get into a little bit of our session today to make sure that we actually cover some of the things that you wanted to talk about. So to give a little bit of background, as I mentioned, we're 8 weeks in. So at this point, Sarah, I know that you're pretty comfortable and confident with charting and with all of the observations and things like that. So just as a question, is there anything that came up for you, even when you were filling out? So we have a little form that we fill out to kind of check in about your comfort level. Was there anything that did come up for you or anything that you wanted to talk about charting wise, or are you feeling pretty good there?
I'm actually feeling pretty good. The one thing I was hoping we could kind of look at was, as you know, I gave up 5 days ago, I gave up coffee. I had like weaned myself down to 1 cup a day. But obviously, since my charts show that my hormones or my chart's not ideal or optimal at this point, and it looks like, my hormones are not optimal. And when we had last talked, I felt like that was my next step that I needed to take. So I'm 5 days caffeine free. Yay. I know I'm alive. I've been okay to drive. It's been fine.
That's so funny. Everything's, I know you mentioned you didn't even get withdrawal headaches, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't have any headaches, which I think what it was is I felt since I've given up alcohol and I've like really changed things around. I felt like my 1 cup of coffee was my my last fun thing. So I think that's why I was so hesitant to give it up, but it's time. I'm ready. I don't need anything else influencing my hormones or messing up my sleep cycle. Time to get serious.
Well, a little background for the listeners. So in our group sessions, we talk about different topics every week. In one of our recent sessions, we were talking about sleep and the sleep hormones, melatonin and cortisol, and just all the different things that can impact the natural flow of hormones and how that is related to your cycle hormones. Sarah and I, because we've been together for a little over 2 months now, we actually have 3 charts. So of course, one is still in progress, but we have kind of 3 months of information to go on. And so when you're looking at those things, And really what we're doing is just trying to figure out what could possibly be affecting your cycles, especially when we're seeing signs of low progesterone in the luteal phase, or just what I call like a low hormone pattern. And so one of the things is coffee, unfortunately, that we got to look at because it can be affecting the stress hormone. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see the effects of this, Sarah, until I would say we would have a better idea if this is making a difference within the next, say, couple days, or even the next cycle or the cycle after that, to kind of see the progression of it. But you mentioned that you noticed a little bit of a change already. You said a change in temperature.
Yes, in my temperatures. Yeah.
And I could see, so this temperature is the one temperature here that I'm seeing on the 16th day is questionable, but yeah, it's hard to know if I do see what you're saying though, because these temperatures are, so post-coffee.
Right.
The post-coffee temperatures are a little higher than the pre-coffee temperatures. But we don't have enough data to be able to even say if that could be why.
Right. I know.
So I think if we really wanted to get a sense of if that could be why, then we'd have to wait to see this cycle and the next cycle to see like if there is actually a shift in temperatures between these two charts. But yes, that's interesting. And also you mentioned to me that and you had an unexpected effect. So you gave up the coffee and then you said that your digestion improved. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So Lisa and I had talked during our session and I had told her, I was having some, digestion issues, and I wasn't sure like what was causing this because I've had this like on and off for a couple of years. I, didn't know, like a lot of times I felt like it was caused by anxiety. But at this point, since, I've really focused on my nutrition, I'm getting plenty of sleep, my anxiety is like way down. I didn't know if it was some of the supplements I was taking. So I've been really trying to like figure out what it is. And it's the coffee. So I haven't had any problems for the past 5 days. So it's amazing.
Well, so of course I always ask all the questions, but I want to get a sense of, so what were you actually experiencing before so that went away in the last 5 days? So
I was like going to use the restroom like several times a day, and then I would often have diarrhea. And so now I'm thinking this was just like a caffeine sensitivity that I didn't realize. Well, yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think that what's interesting about food sensitivities, like if that's what this is, because that would indicate that it's definitely a possibility that you have a sensitivity to coffee if you get rid of it, and then that's a pretty big difference. Especially, so is that something that you basically experienced like every day? It wasn't every day, but it was definitely a couple times per week. Okay. And so, I would have the past 5 days, I would have definitely experienced it during that time, Okay. So even though it wasn't every day, you didn't go there was never 5. I would say there was probably not 3 days where you didn't experience it. Yeah. Cause it's really interesting with sensitive, because of course we don't necessarily know what we could possibly be sensitive to. The only way that you would ever know is if you either take a test or if you do some sort of elimination situation where you actually get rid of something for a while and then bring it back. But what's interesting is that it's often things that that we're kind of quote unquote addicted to. I don't mean that word literally, but things that you really Yeah. So there's often this weird relationship. It's the thing that you need to have, something that you eat all the time. And yeah, so if you do have a true sensitivity to coffee, so that's adding kind of another layer on top of the potential hormone disrupting effects of coffee. But it'll be interesting to see if anything changes in your next cycle. It'll be hard to know, is this because of cortisol? Is this because of sensitivity? But it doesn't really matter if your cycle's getting better. We're happy either way. Yes. Yes. All right. Well, so that's exciting that you've been making that progress. So what I see on your chart here is that you had 1 day of peak mucus. Yes. Right around the time that you gave up the coffee. And it looks like you may have ovulated, but it's hard to tell. That could also be why your temperatures are a little bit higher. Do you have any sense of whether or not you've ovulated yet? I was thinking that I did just on kind of where I know the listeners can't see, but just we're looking at my chart right now. I had thought, where there was that jump there too.
Yeah.
Not a big jump, but.
Well, because what we're looking for are 3 temperatures that are higher than the previous 6. And so if we follow that rule to the letter, so then we could say your temperature rose on the 13th day, although it's like a smidgen. But
right, that's true.
But however, it still rose and it's still higher than the previous 6 and it has remained high. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 temperatures that are higher than the previous 6 here.
Right.
So to kind of bring back our conversation regarding the coffee and whether it made a difference in temperature, this difference that we're seeing in temperature could just be ovulation. But in this case, the temperature didn't rise so much that it's like this big giant leap. It's a subtle rise.
Right.
But it's still a rise. So that might be why. So I would say based on what we're seeing, it's very possible then that you ovulated, say, on day 12, thereabout, and then your 1 day of peak mucus was on day 11. So it would line up.
Okay.
Like your mucus lines up with the temperature rise.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And I noticed that we timed sex perfectly on peak day, which is good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about that in the group in terms of timing. So there's so many moving parts. We're talking about hormonal health. We're talking about all this different types of things. But when we talk about also just the practical application of the fertility awareness method. So in Sarah's chart that you can't see, she has 1 day of peak mucus. So she had 1 day of clear, stretchy mucus that she saw one time that day. And so had she not been charting, it's literally this 1 day that it's easy to miss 1 day if you're not paying attention to it.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, we spoke about this a little bit in the group too. One of the unfortunate effects of Clomid and the other drugs that trigger ovulation, some of the other drugs that trigger ovulation, each of them have different effects. I think one of the things that is interesting about some of these drugs is that there's a number of drugs that have these anti-estrogenic effects on the body. And so there's certain drugs that are used for ovulation that are actually anti-cancer drugs because they have this anti-estrogenic effect. So they make your cells insensitive to estrogen. So it's like your body can't correctly perceive how much estrogen you have. And so it keeps producing more. And then ovulation is like a side effect of that. But one of the downsides is that it can have a negative impact on your mucus. So do you remember, I mean, it's hard because I know you weren't paying attention back then, but do you remember having peak mucus days?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, again, it's, as you said, it's, this is what I think since I wasn't charting at the time. But yeah, I do remember like I used to, but honestly, I don't think like being on birth control for as long as I was, I don't think that helped my cervical mucus either. But yeah, because I don't have like a ton of it.
Yeah.
But one thing we did talk about though was because of that, for me, next cycle, I'm going to start testing my cervix position just to kind of help give me more information since I don't have as much cervical mucus to look for. So.
Yeah. So yeah, it can be helpful. It can be helpful to at least give you an additional sign to look for to confirm when you're in your fertile window. But yeah, like, cause I mean, between this cycle and last cycle, so I would say there is a difference that we're seeing here. So in your previous cycle, you had one kind of random day of peak mucus that seemed to happen well before ovulation.
Right. Early. Yeah.
And then in your last cycle, it does look like you ovulated, but again, there was a very subtle, small shift. So again, it wasn't, if you were looking at the chart, you would see that the temperatures don't really look a whole lot different. But if you look really closely, there is a really subtle shift there. But the other thing was that the mucus didn't 100% line up with the shift. So it's like a subtle shift that the mucus doesn't fully line up with it. So I'm not sure if we can really So for me, the way I think about charts and cycles and monitoring and this whole kind of outlook of using your chart and making changes and then kind of looking back at the feedback that your chart gives you, I typically think of that to happen in basically several months. So looking at 3 charts at a time, and then kind of that allows you to have a little bit of feedback. So, but with that being said, between this chart and last chart, it looks like your mucus lined up a lot better with ovulation. And although the shift is still subtle, as you can see, your post-ovulatory temperatures, assuming that that's what this truly is, are higher. And so we're seeing more of a actual shift here, like more of a confirmed.
Okay.
So I don't know. I always look for little subtleties, because what I find in the work that I do is that when you pay attention to the stuff, and Sarah, you've made a ton of changes, dietary supplements, because you're working with me, but you're also working with, functional practitioners, like you're working with a bunch of practitioners who are all supporting you. And so you're making a lot of positive changes. And so it's a little early to tell, but I see some positive, like I see what looks like a positive shift.
Yay!
Woohoo!
I'll take it.
Yeah. You're just lining up with ovulation. This is what we want to see.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay. And you had some updates for me. So you, in the group, we had been talking about this. You had an appointment with a naturopath, and we were like itching to find out what the naturopath had to say.
Yes. So I had, I know, I'm so excited to update you on this. So I had my follow-up appointment with my naturopath yesterday, actually. And that's where we would talk more about, treatment. And so she did give me a list of just kind of different, like recommendations. Some of them were for lifestyle. And one that I liked too, that she they're like it's a whole page of them, but one that I thought was really good is she gave me these little stickers to put around my house, and just to like every time I saw it to remember to like take in like 3 deep breaths to kind of help pumping blood to the liver, and just taking that time to just take a moment for myself too. And then this was really cool. And I don't know, some people probably think this might be weird. So I think for me, I'm at this point where I'm just like open to everything. So I think I was like ready to hear this kind of things. But she said like each morning, like just ask yourself, like talking to your body, like how can I best support you today? And just like having gratitude for like things that are working with your body. And so I thought that was really cool, because one thing she talked about is we think of like our mind as one thing and our body as a separate thing. And just, she talked about how they're connected. They work together. They're not, 2 separate things. And so she did have a couple more nutrition, just suggestions. But the coolest thing that we did, Lisa, have you ever heard of muscle strength testing?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So this was right. Okay. So this was so weird. So she had me sit down in the chair, and I put my arm like up straight out, with my thumb facing down. And she would like ask me a question and just like press just gently on my arm. And I know this sounds so bizarre, but just for like a test, what we did was, she like asked, like, are you sitting? And my like hand stayed up, and then she was like, are you standing? And my arm went down. Yeah. And I know that sounds so bizarre, but I mean, I'm not making this up. And this happened.
It doesn't sound bizarre to me. I'll just tell you, I've heard of this being done. I think I've heard like Tony Robbins or Jack Canfield does this in their presentations. Yeah.
It was the coolest thing ever. And so then what she did is she had me hold different herbs in my hand, and basically was like, she would say it out loud while I was holding the herb in my other hand. And, if my hand stayed up, she put in one pile. If my hand went down, she put another pile. And then, based on that, the herbs that my body like said it needed, those were the ones that she created like a little homeopathic medicine for me that I'm going to start taking. And then the other thing, you'll love this, is so then she also did kind of like tested different parts of my body and she did say too, we were like talking to my body and she asked it, is this like a physical problem, the fertility, or is this emotional? And it came back like that it was emotional, but that it was affecting like certain, parts of my body. And the parts that came up that were like affected were my thyroid, which is like very interesting.
Very.
My liver and my I don't know if I'm saying this, thalamus, like part of your like immune system.
Thymus?
Is that correct? Yes, thymus. Thank you. And then she also said the last area was peripheral. And she said it's not like your spine, but it's like the messages that travel off your spine. And so it was such an interesting experience. And it was really cool. And I'm really excited about taking my little homeopathic medicine. But the craziest part was just like the thyroid. And I will say like, that was like my arm went down like super far on that one.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it was a really cool experience. And I'm happy, I'm really happy. Like I'm moving in this direction, with my health. It's like, I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I remember when we first met. So we first met on a quick call before the class actually started. And I could be making this up because I have a lot of calls, but I feel like I said to you, I was like, oh, like it's time that you get taken care of. It's like, it's time for you to actually be taken care of.
Yeah.
And
actually, I actually remember what you said. You were like, it's time to stop pussyfooting around.
That sounds like me. Yeah. Maybe I was trying to make it sound better.
But you know what? I think I just like but I know that it's like funny, but I was like, I think I just like needed to hear that. Like, it's time to like, I've tried all these other things that, I don't want to knock anything because I know that, they do work for certain people, but obviously like, as you said, they have not worked for me. And I think, we can all agree that, we're not going to be lucky on our like 10th IUI. So it's time for me to kind of take a step back for things that were not working, that were not successful for my husband and myself, and look for other answers. And I think part of that is instead of just kind of giving someone medicine to mask a problem, it's really taking the time to see like what is going on, like why are your hormones off? Why? Like the why of it, and focusing on, getting your body healthy instead of just taking a pill or an injectable to like, have a different response.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't have said it better myself, because ultimately there is a reason why. And there's a lot of benefits of charting, but, even as our group comes to a close, my intention with the group, and I think I said this even in our group session, because it's always sad for me when our groups come to an end, because it means that it's like I'm the mother hen and I have all of my, wonderful ladies with me, and then I send you out into the world. But the purpose of this is for me to set you up so that you're able to then go on and chart and monitor. And you have the ability to look at your own progress. And so you're well versed now in, the markers of a healthy cycle. And so you can continue to observe and watch to see. It's harder when you're in the thick of it. It's easier for me to look at these two charts and see that this one looks like there's an improvement. So whereas you may not have, that may not have been the first thing that came to your mind. You might be still thinking like, I only have one day of mucus and my temperatures are still, right? Because this is what we do. We're totally on top of ourselves. Like, yes, my chart isn't perfect. And that's normal. But we all do it. But what I would encourage you to do, like, so now you have an understanding, like, of what a normal healthy cycle is supposed to look like, but you also have all this information. So as you continue to work with your practitioners, if we continue to work together or however this plays out, you will still always have the ability to fall back on your charts and look. So if in a couple of months well, let's hope that in a couple of months you're just pregnant. That would be obviously the best case situation. But if we're kind of thinking in terms of like slow progression of growth and slow progressions of improvement, if in a couple of months we do notice that your temperatures have kind of steadily risen a little bit, indicating that your metabolism is where it needs to be, you're working with your naturopath now, so determining what exactly is happening with your thyroid and really optimizing that. Also paying attention to your mucus observations and the patterns that we're seeing there. You've given up coffee. You've made a lot of positive lifestyle improvements. You know what I mean? Like there's so many things that you can do to optimize. Right. And when you're charting, then you actually have this record. So you can look back at your charts in January and be forgiving, but take a look at the key markers, right? So like, oh, look, how many days of mucus do I have now? Where are my temperatures? Like, how long is my luteal phase? Am I having spotting before my period? Right. And what I have seen with my clients is that when you are making forward motion and you are making positive changes and you're not really stopping. So if something's off and you think, okay, it might be this and it's not that, you still continue to look for what it is, right? Like you continue to search, you continue to figure out until it is. I do see forward motion. I mean, that's why I do what I do. I see improvements in the charts and and so in your case, I mean, if all this time your thyroid was suboptimal, I mean, a TSH of 4 point something.
I know.
It is too high when you're trying to conceive. Ask any functional doctor. Right. It's not me. Yes. It's not just me. Ask any functional practitioner. Yeah. So when those types of things are taken care of.
Oh, no. I was just going to say too, when I shared them with my naturopath, she said the same thing that you did. She likes them at 1 or 2.
Yeah. So it's just a different paradigm, really. Right.
And then this was interesting too. I wanted to bring up, because, I talked to her, I asked her, because I do, in talking to you and her, I definitely want to go through a full thyroid panel test done. And then also, you and I had talked about doing iron, folate, and a couple of other things tested. And so I had asked her, is there any, because she's not allowed to do, I live in Ohio and she's not allowed to do like blood tests here. I think California, they're allowed to, and I think that's the only state in the United States that naturopathic doctors are allowed to do labs currently. So I asked her, I was like, is there somewhere you recommend that I can go and maybe not get pushback? And she was like, unfortunately not. But she did give me a tip that I wanted to share. She said to go in, when I go in, to just be like, I feel really tired. And then,
Yep.
Because I know, because we've talked about in our group, like a lot of times, we'll feel like something is wrong and we're not necessarily being heard, or we don't feel confident enough to ask, our doctor will say something and then we'll be like, okay, but we don't know what it means. So, I thought that was a good tip for hopefully I can get, what I want done.
Yeah. It's a way of, setting yourself up for success with your physician. But, I've talked about this a lot on the show. And so, Sarah, what I always say, and it's really sad that I feel the need to say it even, but it's that you have to kind of go in there with all of the possibilities, all of the outcomes in mind. So you can go in there and ask your physician for a full panel, and your physician can be like, oh yeah, that's not a problem. Maybe your physician will kind of be like, I don't think it's necessary, but you'll be able to kind of twist her arm. And then on the flip side, your physician might actually say, those tests are totally unnecessary. The only test that I'm willing to do is the TSH test. You don't need any of the others. So you kind of have to know that. And it's just an unfortunate reality. It's literally like practitioner by practitioner. Some will do it, some won't. And so, it's like, good luck. I hope it goes well.
I know.
At least you have the group so we could talk about it.
Yeah, me too.
Either way.
Yes.
But as we bring our session to a close today, I mean, we've talked about a few things. And essentially what we're doing is kind of checking in, because we've had a lot of the heavy lifting conversations in a lot of our other sessions.
Right.
Where so this is more of like, okay, we've identified these are the possible things. You've you've made your appointment, you're, getting things checked out. And so we're kind of in the midst of this process. Are there any questions that you did have to close us out today?
No, I didn't. I did want to say, if any of your listeners are, thinking, I know you have a new group class coming up. And I would just say, if anyone is thinking about this, or just even think, maybe definitely book a 15-minute consult with Lisa. I'm so glad I did. Just because, there's so much information, I was doing charting a different way, but I wasn't like getting all of this information with I was looking for cervical mucus, but I didn't know that there were like different types. And so I've just learned so much more about, basically how to conceive. And I just, I just would have never known this. And I mean, I'm 36. So, I know that there's a lot of people out there who are kind of in the same boat. And I can tell you, I have learned so much, to the point too, where I think about if I'm so lucky that, we have a girl, one day I'm like, oh my gosh, I can teach her how to chart, and then she'll know all this information about her body. So, but I would definitely, I just feel so fortunate that, I decided to join this group, and I've learned so much, and I just feel, I think it always feels good when you're kind of taking control and you're learning more about yourself. And I think too, you can make lots of doctor's appointments, but at the end of the day, nobody knows your body like you, and you're the one who's ultimately in charge. And I just feel like you've empowered me to be able to, interpret, the signs that my body's giving me, that were always there, but I just wasn't paying attention to them. So I wanted to say thank you.
Oh, Sarah, that is the sweetest, kindest. Thank you so much. I actually might cry a little.
Oh no.
But that's okay. It's welcome here. It's but no, that's really sweet of you to say, and I'm really, you know what, Sarah, it's been just an absolute pleasure. You're like a ray of sunshine. You're just so sweet and kind. Oh. And I only wish our groups were in person. It's cool with the internet.
I know. Oh my gosh, that'd be so fun. Yeah.
But it'd be imagine if we could all just meet in a room. But of course, But I really appreciate you saying that. And I've loved our group. Our group is very, very, so our group is kind of small. We have 6 women in our group, and everybody is very sweet and kind and understanding. We've had a lot of, it's a good, safe opportunity to share. So a lot of things have come up in our group, and also in our Facebook group. Yeah. That's been a great place for you to connect and be supportive of each other. So I'm just honored to kind of hold that space for all of you to connect, because it's amazing. And I think I might have said this on the podcast a couple times, but as what I do, so my title is like a holistic reproductive health practitioner. That's my training, and fertility awareness educator. And I have often thought to myself, why am I the one pointing this stuff out? You're going to these health professionals that have all these degrees on the wall. You've got $200,000 on the wall. And I'm the one being like, excuse me, the TSH looks a little high. So I don't know what that's about. But I feel very fortunate and blessed to at least be able to support you. And when I was hearing you talk, that's exactly why I do this. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Trying to help empower all of us to be able to support, because ultimately, I always say this, no one cares about your body and your fertility and your health more than you do. And so, but we just need, it's you just need to be given the information so that you can take the reins, right? Oh,
yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I think, I think it's a good place to stop. Is there as one last question to kind of close it out as the responsible interviewer, to try to bring it to a close in a more poetic type of way.
Yeah.
What, if anything, would you want to say to a woman who's listening to the show and who has been struggling in a similar, or has had a similar path to you, where they've been trying to conceive for a bit of time here?
Sure. Yeah. I would say, because I know it can be very overwhelming, and I know that there is, as we get older and we're trying to conceive, I know that there's that added pressure. But I would definitely take care of yourself, and, whether that's, doing yoga or meditating or, journaling all those anxious thoughts out. Just find a way for you to feel good about yourself. And for me, it had been doing incorporating those wellness practices. But also for me, I have felt so much better since I started being more proactive. And honestly, at this point, I don't get stressed about timing anymore, because I know that I'm, addressing these health issues, and I'm doing what I can on my end. So I found that I was able, when I felt empowered, and then also when I had strategies for times when I did feel stressed, to know what to do. And then I would just say too, if you can look for a support group, whether that's, joining Lisa's fertility awareness group. I'm actually in a couple support groups right now. I go monthly to my fertility clinic. They have a support group. And then I also go with my fertility yoga. Another session has started where there's about 12 of us in this session, and we meet every Sunday, do yoga, but we also, support each other too. And that's been huge for me, because I think, I'm very fortunate that, I can always talk to my husband about this, and I have family and friends who are definitely there for me. But at the same time, there's something to be said when you're with women who are dealing, with the same issue that you're dealing with, because they can really relate. So that's also been very helpful for me too. And I would just say, if you don't want to give up, don't give up. If you see yourself, that you're going to be a mom, you're going to be a mom. I think what I had to get let go of was just being in control of the timing. And I know it's going to happen, but I just, it's not necessarily when I want it to happen. And so I think letting go of that and just knowing that I'm doing everything I can do, I feel amazing. So.
Well, wonderful words to end on. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being on the show and for being so open and just vulnerable with your own story. I can't even imagine how many women are going to listen to this episode, be touched by it. So I'm sure on my behalf, but on also the listeners' behalf, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/169. That's fertilityfriday.com/169. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Sarah. It was so nice to have her on the show, and as you can tell, we have had a lot of fun together in our group. And we've really gotten a chance to get to know each other and also to really dive deeply into Sarah's chart. So to hear that she's feeling empowered and really feeling just more of a sense of hope, and in that sense of actually feeling in control of your cycles after so long of feeling like there was nothing that she could do, that just really makes me feel really happy and really excited to hear that that's how she's feeling coming out of the program. I'm essentially, with the program, I'm trying to recreate my own experience of learning how to chart. And so when I first learned how to chart, I actually used to go to a monthly group. So we didn't meet weekly, but I was part of a charting circle that still meets. So if you happen to live in Edmonton, Alberta, you would still have the opportunity to look up the Fertility Awareness Charting Circle, because it's still going, although I don't live in Alberta anymore. And so, when I was first learning to chart, I was part of the group. So at first I was a member, and I would come and we would meet every month, and I would have an opportunity to learn about charting and also to have my charts reviewed by women who knew a whole lot more about charting than I did. And, shortly after joining and being part of the group, I actually became one of the women who taught. That was an amazing experience for me, and it allowed me to share this knowledge. And so a group of us took a class and we began teaching. And so we would lead the group sessions, do the big intro. We did one big intro each year. And then each month, new members would come in and we would do like a mini intro with the new members and then review the charts of all the women who had already been part of the group. And it basically just allowed us to continue to check in over that 9-month period. So women would come, they would learn charting, and then they would be able to come back month after month and have their charts reviewed, and just to get a sense of what's happening, and also to just gain confidence in using this method as birth control. Some of the ladies in the group were, trying to conceive, or whatever the case was for them. Essentially, what I'm doing with my group program is recreating that environment in the way that I am able to do that now. So as I said in the when I was talking to Sarah, it would have been so nice if all of us could meet physically in a location each week. But the wonder of the internet allows us to connect even if we're really far away from each other, and to bring women together that otherwise you'd never have an opportunity to meet. I'm really fortunate and blessed to be able to do this and to create this safe space to talk about these topics, and also just to give the opportunity to these amazing women who join the group to really dive deeply into fertility awareness charting. Towards the end of the group, the women consistently in all the groups that I've run feel just so much more confident about their charting, and they really get down the basics of it. Ultimately, with the support of the group, with the support of me taking you through that process of charting, by the time you reach your second chart, towards the end of the first chart, end of the second chart, you're feeling really confident just with the nitty-gritty of the method. And then it kind of moves into that second stage of really starting to figure out what's happening with the cycle, and if there's anything that we need to be looking at. If this is something that you would like to be part of, if you are really looking to deepen into your own knowledge and understanding of fertility awareness, if you're kind of starting out, or even if you have several months of charting or even a year more under your belt, but you're still not feeling that confident relying on this method for birth control, or you're seeing some things on your chart and you're just wanting that clarification of what could possibly be going on, I want to invite you to be part of my next 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery Group program. And so we will be starting in January, and I will be completing the registration process and getting everybody organized and ready for a January start date in the months of November and the early part of December. So if you're wanting to be part of this group, if you're wanting to join us, then make sure to apply as soon as you can, just to make sure that there's still space available in the group. So you'll find more information about the 10-week program at fertilityfriday.com/group program. So that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. I think it's an awesome time to start the new year strong. There's just something about the new year. There's lots of good energy. I always go into the new year with a lot of optimism and hope. Going into the new year, doing this program and being surrounded by other women who are in the same spot, who are just as enthusiastic and eager to really gain that confidence in fertility awareness charting, I think you couldn't think of a better way to start 2018. So I hope to see you in there. I just want to thank you for listening to the show, and also for supporting the show, sharing the show. It's because of you that I continue podcasting, and also all of you who are listening to the show, and you're kind of like show ambassadors for spreading the word. You're really helping to get out that message to women. Unfortunately, we're not being taught about how our body works, and we really need to take it into our own hands. So all of you are part of this grassroots movement that's happening. In case you didn't know, there is a grassroots movement that's happening. Periods are being talked about more than ever before. In the media, there was a time when you would never have seen as much press coverage and public discussion of periods, of the menstrual cycle, about fertility awareness charting. Fertility awareness charting, it wasn't even a blip on the radar a couple decades ago, and now it's becoming more and more common. So there is a grassroots movement happening where women are starting to really want to know more about their bodies and really kind of step into the public forum with that knowledge. Women are becoming more aware of hormonal contraceptives and some of the negative impacts that they have on the body. In the words of Tony Weschler, taking charge of our fertilities. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.